Welcome back to another episode of Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me, your host, Downtown Heather Brown, and I am a former deputy district attorney from Orange County. I worked in the sexual assault unit for 10 years and the homicide unit for 5, and everyone loves a good true crime story. I love telling true crime stories, and I love hearing crime stories from people who work in the underbelly. And the point of this entire podcast is to just shine some light on some amazing people who are doing work to help victims of crime and shine light in the darkest places. And today we have a very special guest that I've had the pleasure of working with a few times over the years. With us today is Steve Kramer, who is a former prosecutor, a former federal prosecutor, former district attorney, former federal prosecutor, and an attorney for the FBI. And now he owns his own company that works primarily in genealogy. And Steve was instrumental in helping solve the Golden State Killer case. So he's here today to talk to us about his career, where we're going to start a little bit about your career. Tell us what you want us to know about your career. It sounds like you've done everything. Why can't you keep a job, dude?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
I know, that was the funny part. Like, I never actually really wanted to be an attorney, believe it or not.
Really? What'd you want to be?
I wanted to work on Wall Street, I think.
Really?
And I certainly had no interest in criminal law. Like, that was like the most foreign thing to me ever. But I ended up going to law school after college. Just my dad really pressured me to. I wanted to go to business school, which I eventually did, but he wanted me to get a law degree. He'd been involved in commercial real estate and lots of lawsuits, and he just felt
he wanted a family attorney. He's no dummy.
That's exactly what he wanted.
He wanted free
wanted
legal
his own
advice.
attorney. So I ended up going to law school, and my intent was really just to go to law school and then just go work on Wall Street or do something like that. And I ended up getting an internship my second year of law school with the San Diego District Attorney's Office, and I was a certified law clerk. I think that's what they called it, right? Yeah. So it was, and I just my first week on the job, I was like responding to, I think it was a motion to dismiss on I think it was a murder case, and I wrote it, and they're like, "Go argue it now." And so there I was, like, 23 years old,
love that.
arguing in court, a very serious felony case, because it was on those type of cases in San Diego, that was kind of like horizontal prosecutions. They just turned everything over, to different units to do what. And so where I worked was kind of the motions department. And so we would handle all the major felonies, as well as the small felonies, but they'd have us in there working with senior attorneys doing those type of cases. So I ended up, doing motions to dismiss, suppression motions on big cases, and little misdemeanor trials. And I'm like, this is pretty cool.
And you liked it?
Yeah, no. So
you got the bug. You got the DA bug.
Yeah. I mean, it was actually one of those things, like, you felt like this is actually really cool. And it was fun working with, like, the cops. I mean, literally, I'm 23 years old, and I'm sitting in my little office at the DA's office, and I have all these detectives sitting in my office waiting for instructions from me.
Yeah, it's good, huh?
So it was like really? I don't know anything.
Yeah,
so, it was fun. It was a great experience. I learned a lot. And as you know, like, when you do motions like that, like, you learn how to write really well. Like, you don't really learn how to write that well in law school, a little bit maybe, but when you have to put it on paper and then go to court and get questioned by a judge, and then, have a defense attorney counter you, with the response, and then argue it. So it was a great experience. So I ended up doing that even after that for another 3 months in El Cajon, California. And so I ended up, like, that's what I want to do. I want to go do this for at least a few years and become a litigator. So that was my goal. So I ended up doing that. And then my first job I got in criminal law was with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in Phoenix. So we called ourselves county attorneys, deputy county attorney. It's the same thing as a deputy district attorney.
Okay.
So I ended up doing that. And that was actually probably the most fun job I had at the time. And as you probably started young too, right?
Yeah. I was a baby DA back in
and there was
the 1900s.
It was like, I always tell people, it was like you go to college and you hang out with all your peers, and then you go to law school and you hang out with all your peers, and then going to the DA's office was like kind of like the next level of school. I'm with all my peers. We're all the same age. Everyone's in their mid to late 20s, and you're all doing the same thing. Instead of walking to class, you're walking to court. I'm like, hey, Heather, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to so-and-so's court. Oh, I'll walk with you. Like, hey, can you cover this for me? I'm going to, pop into this other court. Yeah, I got it. Like, I loved that, like, camaraderie.
There's so much camaraderie.
Yeah, I love the camaraderie with that. And to me, it just felt like I was in college again, hanging out with everybody, going out for beers after.
It's very social.
I loved it. I love the social aspect of it.
I loved it too.
And if you know me, I'm a pretty social person, and I like,
How are you friends with my husband? He's the least social person on the planet. He likes nobody. He doesn't want to be around anybody, even me.
Yeah. So I ended up doing that, working in Phoenix, and I loved it. I got lucky. Sometimes it's always better to be lucky than good. And I ended up doing like a trial, like a misdemeanor. I think it was a DUI trial in our downtown court. And the front office, the bigwigs happened to be down there. Hey, there's one of the new attorneys down there doing a trial. And so I did this trial, and a lot of people saw it. And so I was really fortunate. They kind of picked me and put me into a vertical unit.
They liked what they saw.
Yeah,
you had some skills in the courtroom.
Yeah, so I got picked, and so I got picked into a vertical unit, meaning we charge our own cases. It was a vehicular homicide department, and it was great. They're like, okay, here's your badge, here's your car, here's your pager. Like, if there's a crime, you got to be ready. You're on call this week, and you got to show up at the crime scene, at 2:00 in the morning, and it was great. And it was just like you see on TV, like go out underneath the police tape. What do we got?
Yes, I know. I do miss that.
Yeah, and I mean, it was
when I was in the homicide unit. That you felt like you were in a TV show because you're like, I'm out there, the coroner's there, right? Now it's horrible.
It is horrible, but it was like and this is what I liked most about criminal law is like you can see things from the very beginning to the very end, and it's pretty finite. I mean, as you know, sometimes you can do cases within 6 months. Sometimes, obviously, they take a few years. But I liked the aspect of, hey, I'm out there at 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday. We got some dead bodies. We got a guy in custody. And we're doing the interviews with the police. What charges are we going to get? And on Monday, I'm back at the office with the charging documents, getting grand jury ready to go indict the guy, get the charges. Weeks, months later, we have a couple of hearings on the case. We either plead it or we try it, and then there's a sentencing, and then there's a conviction. And all the victims are there. There's a closure. Like that whole process, it's amazing to me. It's a whole production. It's a team production. But as a prosecutor, you kind of get to lead it. You get to decide, ultimately, like what charges are going to be, what they're going to plead to, or how you're going to try the case. So I like that a lot. I found that to be not just exciting and compelling, but just very fulfilling. I mean, there's nothing better like when you do a case like that, and it's always tragic, the circumstances, but the seeing the victims and seeing some closure to it, letting them have their day in court, to say what they want to say before the court. So I like that. So that was
very rewarding.
Super, super rewarding.
Very rewarding.
And I enjoyed in the county attorney's office in Phoenix was great. They put me through all the police courses. So I became like a drug recognition expert. I went to homicide school, did all the schools.
A lot of learning, a lot of opportunity to learn things most people ordinarily otherwise would not be able to learn.
Right. And I really appreciate it. I mean, they had us out there driving the cars, doing accident
pit maneuvers.
Yeah,
and stuff.
They wanted us to be riding along, with the cops at night, which by the way is like some of the best times I've ever had.
Best times.
Me and my friends, can you imagine two 25-year-old prosecutors and then two 22, 23-year-old cops, driving around a couple patrol cars on third shift at 2:00
sounds like
in the
a
morning.
recipe for disaster. You might need a defense attorney out there.
Yeah, it was fun. I learned a lot. about, the whole process from soup to nuts when it comes to prosecution investigation. And I remember I was at a school, I think it might have been like DRE, drug recognition expert school, one of them. And then a detective next to me, he's like, oh, you ever think about I'm thinking maybe I go to the FBI next. I'm like, you ever think about that? I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go to the FBI. This is great.
Who said this to you?
Some detective sitting next to me.
You don't even remember the guy's name?
Yeah, I don't remember his name.
You realize that's instrumental in changing your court.
Here's the funny part is this, and this is, I'll go back. And I thought it was cool at the time, but now I think back on it, it's actually, a little more ironic. When I was in law school, I was on law review at my law school, which is, I don't know what you call law review. It's just,
Smarty pants. It's like the smart people.
Yeah, well, you have to write.
I don't even know what it's called. I was that.
Yeah, but you have to write, right?
You have to write. You have to write articles. Study the law and all.
Yeah, so I wrote on law review. I wrote an article that got published, and I was working with the San Diego DA's office, and the prosecutor there that I was working with his name was Woody Clark. And he's a very famous, he's passed away since then, but a very famous prosecutor, kind of one of the leaders in DNA at the time. And so Woody's like, hey, you should write, I'm like, hey, I'm on law review. I got to write an article. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, dude, you need to write it on this thing in DNA and talk about X and Y with DNA. So that's what I did. I wrote this article with his help, and it got published, and it got picked up and got cited a lot. And the FBI called me, and they had questions. They wanted me to answer their questions about, DNA on some of the law, what my research had shown. And Woody Clark, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? The FBI is calling you. You're just a law student. I'm like, I know. But I never really thought much more about it like that. And I was working at the DA's office doing my thing, and I didn't think about it. Then, life kind of gets in the way of things, and I ended up getting engaged and then getting married. My wife worked in Orange County at a law firm, so I had to move from Phoenix to Orange County. So the FBI was advertising, believe it or not, for a job for an attorney, to work in-house at their Los Angeles field office. So I applied for it, and I had, I think, the right background for it from being at the DA's office and some of my other stuff that I had done. And so they ended up interviewing me. I went in and interviewed and went through several series of interviews and finally got the job.
Did you have to go to Quantico?
I did not. I've been to Quantico for schools and training.
Did my husband tell you that he's in Silence of the Lambs?
Oh, no, he didn't tell me that. But it was funny because
he tells everyone to listen.
Of course, I'm sure everybody thinks it's when you go to Quantico, you got to go run the trail, like Jodie Foster did. Of course, I did all that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's holding the kicking bag in the gym behind her for maybe a millisecond.
Can you see him in the movie?
You wouldn't know it was him unless you pause it and zoom it, which we do on a regular basis.
That's
in our family.
Funny. I'm surprised he doesn't have that blown up.
I should blow it up for him. I'm totally gonna do that.
Yeah. So I ended up getting this job at the FBI.
Uh-huh.
And it's a little unique because I was they hired me and this other woman, Tammy Bloomfield, who was a good friend of mine, is a good friend of mine. And so she and I became the first two FBI lawyers in the field that were not special agents.
Really?
So
So you didn't get the special agent title?
Nope. Didn't want it actually. And there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you about it a little bit. But at the time, I just wanted to be a lawyer. And part of it is that they hired us and they said, you can also go work as a federal prosecutor too, because we'd like you to prosecute FBI cases. So I'm like, that was the big enticement. So now I get to go work with FBI agents, go out to crime scenes, work on search warrants, work on all the big FBI stuff. And then I can also go prosecute cases. So, it was great. So
it's
I got
the best
the job.
of both worlds for you. Unless you could be like a stockbroker, like you really wanted to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was funny because I ended up, I was right across the street from UCLA, and I ended up, at one point deciding I'll go to UCLA. So I ended up getting my MBA.
What? This guy's way too ambitious.
Yeah.
I
working
love it.
full time and going to school in the afternoon, 3:00 in the afternoon, going over and going to class, in doing that as well. And just to kind of end the MBA story is I was really ready to leave the FBI. I just wanted to work there for a few years, and then I was going to go to Wall Street. And I actually had interviews with Goldman Sachs and all kind of set up to go. And then 9/11 happened. And that kind of changed the whole dynamic of what was important in the world at the time.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, like, especially in law enforcement, especially at the FBI, everything just became like laser focused on it. And the mission just became everything. And so that was a big motivation for me to stay, and which is what I did. And the job I had, and if you know anything like about the FBI can be a big pain in the ass. Like there's just
I'm married to one. Remember?
It's a huge,
that's the understatement.
But the unique thing about being an FBI attorney is, one, you report to the head of the office, so you don't have a big chain of command, which is great. And you don't have to do a lot of paperwork. You get to approve a lot of things. You have to read a lot of things, but you don't have to go through all the administrative nonsense that they make FBI agents go through, which can be extremely tedious.
100%.
I mean, they've done studies years ago, and it was like an agent has to work from Monday to Tuesday through halfway through Wednesday just on admin before they can do any investigative stuff. So, and I'd been asked, by like the assistant directors and stuff in our office, you should become an agent, and you can have any squad you want. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm totally
Sounds
good.
like too much paperwork.
I don't need it. Like, I work with agents every day. Like, it's fun. If I want to go out on a search warrant or an arrest warrant, I have my little vest. I can get my raid jacket on and I can go out. Like, I didn't have like a crazy desire to do that on a day in, day out basis. And, a lot of agents too will tell you, like, getting up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning,
it's fun at first, but it gets old.
It's fun at first, but you try doing that for 20 years.
It gets old.
It gets really old fast.
It does.
So it was a great job. And as a lawyer goes, it was probably like one of the best jobs you could have, because every day I'd walk into work and I could have an agent come in and talk about, some terrorist that's flying in on an airplane, or some spy that, we need to search, their house, or it's a bank robbery sting, or we're doing an undercover operation. Like, it could be anything.
Every day is different.
So every day was different. Really cool. I mean, I literally walked in and like, hey, we need you in a meeting. We're, drop bombs in Afghanistan and we might have to kill a couple of Americans. Okay. Like, what are the facts? Let's sit down. What are we going to do here? And so, like, it was totally like the job that you'd want, like, if you want to like splice it up and do a Hollywood story of it, because we had everything. Like,
sounds exciting.
Yeah. And speaking of Hollywood, like, I mean, you dealt with Hollywood all the time. There's always an issue or something like that, and it was a really fun, interesting job. And the only downside for me is probably like any job that you do. I spent 23 years there. Your learning curve eventually flattens out. Yeah. And which is fine, but like at some point, like, you want to learn, at least like I do, I'm always curious. I want to learn more. Yeah. And that was actually kind of what happened with me. I'd gotten really fortunate and was able to move from the Los Angeles office to the FBI's Orange County office, which is part of the LA office, but 10 minutes from my house. Yeah. Which is a huge, like, I always tell people, you want to live in Orange County, Los Angeles, if you can find a job that's close to your house, you got it made. Yeah. That's kind of the key, living in Southern California. So
you did that for 23 years?
Yeah, 23 years before I retired. But about 5 years before I retired, I started working on this case, the Golden State Killer case.
Yes, the Golden State Killer case. We're very familiar with that.
Yeah, and you'll appreciate this. So it was actually in 2013. I was at home on a Sunday and reading the Sunday paper, and it was the Los Angeles Times, and it had the Los Angeles Times magazine in it. And there was an article written in that magazine by Michelle McNamara. And it was a great article, investigative reporting. It was really well done. And it talked about this killer who had murdered several people in Northern California, Central California, and then up to 10 people in Orange County, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County. And no one knew about this guy. Like, I mean, and that's all. He was only identified like 25 years after the crimes occurred through the DNA. When the DNAs started matching in the early 2000s to all the different crimes, then all of a sudden law enforcement realized, wow, in the 1970s and early 1980s, we had a killer killing
serial
people,
killer.
Serial killer up and down California that we didn't know about. Like what I tell people is you had a guy out in Visalia, California, known as the Visalia Ransacker from like 1974 to 1975. 120 burglaries, just going into houses and just opening up drawers, taking stuff out, taking underwear out of the women, putting them on the sofa, taking like the photos, like you have photos here, tearing out the pictures of the women, weird stuff. Like just, he ended up at one point trying to kidnap a 16-year-old girl. She woke up in the middle of the night.
Dad came in, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Woke up in the middle of the night, guy had a knife to her throat, pulled her out of the house, pulled her out into the driveway. The dad heard the commotion, came out to rescue his daughter, and the guy turned around, shot and killed her. Dad died right there. 6 months later, we have this guy that starts going into homes in Sacramento, East Sacramento, who became known as the East Area Rapist, East Area being East Sacramento. And he would walk in, and his MO was to usually attack couples. That's what became his MO. Like you'd be sleeping at home with your husband or wife, and he'd wake you up with a flashlight, shine his flashlight on a firearm in his hand, and then he'd throw pre-tied shoelaces to the female and have her tie up her husband or boyfriend. And then he would tie up the woman and then retie the man. And then he would go into the kitchen, get himself something to eat, whatever, take his time, basically establish dominion control of your house as you're sitting there wondering what the hell's going to happen. Then you come back and you put plates on top of the man. Tell the man, if I hear these plates fall, I'm going to come in here and kill you. Take the woman to another room and untie her legs, and then you rape her. Then you'd stop, get something to eat, have a Coke, have a beer, cook something, eat some of your leftovers, rape her again. He'd do this for 3 or 4 hours. And then eventually he'd tie them both up, and then he would leave. So that was the East Area Rapist. He did that to about 50 women over a 3-year period. He ended up killing 2 people who, in the same neighborhoods where he was committing all these crimes, at 9:30 at night, a young couple, Brian and Katie Maggiore, were just walking their dog, 9:30 at night, middle-class neighborhood. The neighbors hear like some screaming and hear popping sounds. 10-year-old, I think it was 10, 11-year-old boy looks out his window, second-story window, sees the flashing, from the gun, and sees these 2 people running. And Brian Maggiore is shot and executed. And then the guy who's wearing a mask is chasing Katie. And just like out of the movie Halloween that came out that same year, like you can imagine this masked man's chasing this woman in between these houses, and she's trying to get between the gates to get away from him, and she's trying to squeeze through the gate, and she can't get through. And he comes up, grabs the top of her head, puts a bullet in the top of her head, runs off. Now, we think it's the East Area Rapist because right next to Brian's body is a pre-tied shoelace that we think he came out of his pocket as he pulled his firearm out. So that was the East Area Rapist. That ended in 1979. And later in 1979, we have a very similar MO, like where couples are together, they're tied up, raped, but now they're being beaten to death. And that happens in Ventura, and then Santa Barbara County, and then eventually in Orange County. A couple of murders in Irvine, 2 in Irvine, and another double murder in Dana Point. And the police didn't connect those crimes at the time. Different jurisdictions, far apart in distance, and they didn't connect them. And it wasn't until 1998 that the Orange County Crime Lab here in Orange County ran the DNA, and they realized, holy crap, these 10 murders are all connected here in Southern California. And so that guy became known as the original Night Stalker. Original because Richard Ramirez was the Night Stalker in Los Angeles, and his crimes happened later in the 80s. So he was named the original Night Stalker here in Orange County. Now, this wasn't connected to the Northern California cases yet either. A couple of years go by, DNA technology gets better in the early 2000s, and then the Sacramento County Crime Lab runs their DNA finally that they can compare with Orange County's DNA. It's the same guy. Now this is really interesting. So we have the connection, the East Area Rapist, original Night Stalker. So the case for us in law enforcement was always called the EAR, East Area Rapist, or ONS, original Night Stalker, or EAR ONS, not a very sexy name. So Michelle McNamara, this article I read, said, look, I'm going to give him a name. I'm just going to call him the Golden State Killer.
Oh, she was the one who named him.
Yeah, a little more savvy on that. It needs a better name. Serial killers need a good name, right?
Yeah.
You want to get the publicity. So that article really got me interested. And this was a Sunday afternoon. So I'm like, okay. I turned to my wife, just like, you and Tom would be talking. I'm like, I think I want to work on this case. She's like, okay. And I go into the office the next day at the Orange County FBI office, and I go to the Violent Crime Squad. I'm like, hey, who's working this case? We look it up. I'm like, oh, I know the detective at Orange County Sheriff. So I call him up, and I think it was Don Vogt. And I called him up. He's like, yeah, no problem, Steve. Gave me access to the case. I'm on the case now.
I love that.
And I just wanted to see if I could use some of my DNA knowledge. And I also figured I could leverage the FBI. Like, we have the FBI lab and all that. I figured this would be a really fun project to work on. So I started, calling the FBI lab and see if I can get the FBI lab to help me. And they were just like,
they were like,
no. Like, oh, I wanted to run like familial DNA, which is basically look for relatives of the people that are in the DNA database, in the national database. And they're like, well, it would crash the system. Okay, well, if it crashes, it crashes. Like, just turn it back on. I mean, it might give you 2,000 false positives. Well, Orange County Sheriff's told me like they will take 2,000 false positives because we can run down 2,000 leads because we have no leads right now. So 2,000
no leads, and there's someone who's been raping and murdering and committing the most horrific crimes on the planet across all of California.
Right. It was like, and then the other thing, the FBI lab, they said, what did they tell me? Well, if we do it for you, we'd have to do it for everybody. I'm like, okay, great. You got to solve all the
Maybe you should be doing it for everybody.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that didn't go down very well. So we looked at other options to do. And then, so the Orange County District Attorney's Office had a task force on it. And so I was invited to be a part of that. So I go to the meetings on that and figure out other avenues that we could go. And we had DNA, a lot of DNA from all the different rapes on the case. And we had something called Y DNA. And so some of the people were, had uploaded the Y profile like to these public databases. And Y DNA is DNA that's only attached to the males. And the reason it can be useful sometimes is because men generally give their surname to their kids, and their boys keep that surname. So they keep their surname and they keep their Y DNA. So if you can get a match in Y DNA, you can maybe get the name of your killer. And cases have been solved that way, where like, hey, here's the Y DNA. It's really common with the name Miller. Is there a Miller on the suspect list? Yes, we have. We should probably look at him a little more closely. So
it's more like an investigative lead is what you're using it for, is an investigative lead.
Yeah. And it can be helpful depending if you have a decent match to it. But so we were doing that in this case. We actually had, so what happened was we were talking about the DNA, and we had a Northern California group that would call in now and then with our group in Orange County at the DA's office. And we would talk and compare notes. And the FBI office in Sacramento was also running it as well. And at one of the meetings, or a couple of meetings, there was a guy there named Paul Holes. And Paul Holes was, he was actually an investigator, but he'd first been in the lab at Contra Costa County. And so he had all the scientific background. And he was also like obsessed with the Golden State Killer, knew all the facts about the case inside and out. He's a really good investigator as well. And I heard him talk, and I'm like, okay, this is a guy that sees it like I do. Like, we're only going to solve this case through the DNA. I mean, it's been 40 years. Okay. And we don't know what he looks like. We don't have his fingerprint, but we have his DNA. Like, you can go back and interview the victims from 40 years ago. You can interview the cops and read the police reports, compare all the notes. But people have been doing that for 40 years. Really, really, really good detectives. There's been amazing detectives that have worked this case. And it has produced 0 leads. So I figured DNA was the way we were going to do it. So Paul and I started talking, and he had done some of the Y-DNA stuff. And we'd actually gotten a match, a really good match on the Y-DNA, like the best match we'd had. And it matched to an individual, I believe it was in Washington State, and he was like 90 years old. And we knew he wasn't the Golden State Killer. I'll see this in the press now and then. It says, oh, we actually got it wrong at one point in time. Like, we never had it wrong. Like, we knew for a fact, this guy was like 90 years old. We knew he was not the Golden State Killer. He just had a really good Y match. And what we wanted to do is go get more of his DNA, another type of DNA called the autosomal DNA. That's the nuclear DNA. That's not a sex chromosome like the Y DNA or X DNA. But that autosomal DNA would help us find out how closely that guy is really related to the Golden State Killer. So we went, talked to him. He was cooperative. He wanted to help. He gave us his DNA. We tested it, and he wasn't even a close relative. So the Y was close, but not really close enough. So at that point, I told Paul, like, well, I'm just going to try to leverage like the FBI name, and we'll talk to the big companies like Ancestry, 23andMe. And that was the cool part about being with the FBI. And like Paul recognized it too. It worked really well because like when you call up a big company, you say, hey, I'm Steve Kramer. I'm an attorney with the FBI. Can I speak to your CEO? They're like, hold on a minute, sir.
Yeah, you get on the phone.
Yeah,
somebody's answering the phone.
That gets people's attention.
I used to get that too when I was a DA, right? If you're like, oh, I'm from the homicide of the DA's office, people would answer the phone. Now, nothing.
Yeah, it's a big difference. Like people call you back, people do that. So,
nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, so that's why the FBI is part of the case. Those 3 letters carry a lot of weight. It's just a leverage technique. And so I was able to have conversations with these companies, and needless to say, Ancestry wasn't really cooperative with us. But one of the companies, Family Tree DNA, the CEO, his name is Bennett Greenspan, he told me, he goes, I definitely want to help. He goes, I served on a federal grand jury. I know what you guys do. The work you do is so important. He goes, I want to do the right thing. I might take some heat for it, but I'm going to do the right thing.
I love people that want to do the right thing.
Yeah, and that's what he said. I'm going to do the right thing. And he's like, Steve, give me the DNA. I'll upload it to our database. Perfect. So Paul and I got the DNA from one of the crime scenes. We sent it off to Bennett Greenspan's lab, Family Tree DNA, and they put it into their database. And 63 days after it went to the database, we identified Joe D'Angelo as the Golden State Killer.
Bango, bango, bongo, baby. I love that.
Yeah. So it was a really amazing technique. I mean, a case that was cold for 43 years was solved by 6 people in 63 days. And that was really, I call it like the watershed case for genetic genealogy, forensic genetic genealogy. And because the moment we did that, like, everybody else was like, we can do that too. Our phones started ringing off the hook at the FBI. And like, how'd you do it? Can we do it? You know, and there were other companies that I think people wanted to do it. It wasn't like a big secret. Like if we could get into these databases, people that have done genetic genealogy, like adoptions, trying to identify your biological parents, they all knew. My friend CeCe Moore, she knew it. They all knew this would work, but no one really wanted to do it. And so it took somebody like the FBI to do it. So when I did it at the FBI, everyone's like, well, if the FBI is doing it and there's an FBI attorney saying it's okay to do, let's do it. So that's when it kind of really started taking off. And it was great. Like I said, my phone started ringing like crazy. My business partner, Steve Bush, he came into my office shortly after that. He's like, because like everybody in my office was like, woohoo, we solved the Golden State Killer case. Like it was a big deal.
That's a big deal.
But then everyone's like, how'd you guys do it? Like that became the bigger thing, this genetic genealogy. So Steve Bush came to my office. He saw that. He's like, yeah, that's really cool that you solved it. You know, serial killer case. But this technique is amazing. Like we got to do more of these. And like we said, we just started doing, you know, a dozen cases and solving these cases all over Orange County, all over the country. And that's when we started the FBI genetic genealogy team. And
so when you're talking genetic genealogy, just for people who aren't versed in that, you're not necessarily identifying who the actual person is, right? Because if their DNA was in some database, you'd have a match from the DNA you have. So you take DNA from a crime scene, it gets uploaded into a system that compares it with any known DNA samples. And then, if it's a match, okay, this is the DNA that matches the profile we already have. But with genetic genealogy, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're taking DNA from a crime scene and you're then basically seeing if there is any other DNA that isn't an exact match, but shows you someone in the familial line that's already uploaded there. Is that what it is?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, kind of. So,
kind of, sort of.
Yeah. So these genetic I'll walk through the basics. So for law enforcement, we use DNA that goes into a system that's run by a software called CODIS, Combined DNA Index System. So CODIS is a software, and the database is called NDIS, the National DNA Index System. And NDIS is made up of, different states, the state DNA index system. So California has a California state DNA index system, and they share their profiles with the FBI, and same with Arizona, Texas, and the other 50 states. And that combined sharing is the National DNA Index System, NDIS. Everybody just calls it CODIS or a CODIS profile. That's the software that runs it. That profile, that DNA profile that the police get from a crime scene or somebody who's convicted of a felony is called a short tandem repeat, or an STR. And that's all you have to know. It's just a profile called an STR. And it's really, really, really good about identifying you to the exclusion of everybody else on the planet. Like the odds of somebody having a random match, like in the Golden State Killer case, was 1 out of 47.5 septillion, like 24 zeros, 25 zeros after that number. Like, it's incredible. Like, more people than ever lived on the earth. So that's what the STR is really good for. Now, the genealogy companies, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Ancestry, they use a different profile on the genome. And that one's called a single nucleotide polymorphism, or we just call it an SNP is an acronym. We call it a SNP. And so you have STR with CODIS and a SNP with genealogy. And I always tell people, they're just different. One's an apple, one's an orange. And a lot of times, we train cops all the time, like, because the question we always get is, I have an STR. Can you just turn it into a SNP? You can't do that. You can't turn an orange into an apple. You can't get apple juice out of an orange. You got to go back to the source evidence and get a new profile. That's all it is. So this SNP, this is what, in the Golden State Killer case, we went to the Ventura Crime Lab and had to get new DNA from the sexual assault kit from one of the rapes, and got new DNA and got the SNP profile. And you upload it like any other customer into, say, like Family Tree DNA. And these databases like Ancestry, 23andMe, if you do a test with them, then you check off that you want to match your DNA with everybody else in the database. Now, no one's going to see your DNA. No one's going to see, if you have the A, G, and T at a certain location. All it is sharing. Like, how much DNA do I share with Heather Brown? Do I share any? If I share any, I might be a distant cousin of yours. If I share none, we're probably very, very, very distantly related. And that's all it is, because the easiest way to break down genealogy is you share exactly 50% of your DNA with your father and 50% of your DNA with your mother. Now, your children, they share about 25% of their DNA with your parents. So, and then as you go further and further down, 25, 12 and a half. Now, if you go to your cousins, it becomes, even smaller. So as you break it down, so you could have, just a few percentage points, and that might be, your first cousin or your second cousin. So the more you share, the closer you are.
Related.
Right.
Gotcha.
So if you take bad guy's DNA and you put it into this database, it's going to give you not the bad guy, because he's presumably not in the database, but it's going to give you his relatives. Now, not maybe his kids, maybe not his cousin, his first cousin, but it'll probably give you a second or third or fourth or a fifth cousin. And you probably have a lot of them.
Those cousins had to have uploaded their DNA to one of these databases.
And so I always tell people, or people tell me, like, oh, you'd never find me. I've never done a DNA test. I'm like, of course I'd find you. I'm like, how would you find me, Steve? I've never done a DNA test. I'm like, you don't need to do a DNA test because I can guarantee you have a third cousin who has. You probably have several third cousins and a lot of fourth cousins that have done a DNA test. And that's all I need. No. You know, we've had plenty of cases where we've identified somebody off of one third cousin. So you don't need to do a DNA test. So like I said, most of these suspects that we chase have never done a DNA test, but they have relatives. Because you think that you might have 1,000, third cousins.
Yeah. And you might not even know of them. And they certainly don't know that they have a serial killer lurking in their family. Yeah.
We always do it. Like when my colleagues, when we talk at conferences, we're like, okay, look, I'll give you $100 right now if anybody here can name their third cousin. Nobody can.
Yeah.
Nobody can name your second cousin once removed. Most people can't even name, their second cousin.
These are the fun games that the FBI
yes, like you can't do it. But the other caveat I will say is so everybody's uploaded their DNA, and you'll appreciate this as a prosecutor. The general public has uploaded their DNA to this database, and they've checked a box, and they said, yeah, I want to share my DNA with everybody. Just again, how much all you're going to see is a percentage. You share 2%, 1%, 0.5% of DNA with somebody. It's not
giving you the information.
It's not giving you my genetic code. So you do that and you share with everybody. And so, from the Fourth Amendment, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy in that? No. If you're sharing it publicly, you have no expectation of privacy in that. Right. And it's just like I tell people, if you walk out into your front yard to the curb of your street and you're in your underwear and somebody drives by with their iPhone and they snap a picture of you, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, if somebody sneaks into your backyard, hops over your fence, goes up to your bedroom window, in between the curtains, sticks their phone in and takes a picture of you in your underwear, that's an invasion of privacy, clearly. It's a big difference between the two. You're not making any efforts to keep it private. So when you agree to share with the general public, you're agreeing to share with law enforcement. So
when you sneak into someone's home and tie up their husband and rape them and leave your semen behind, you're sharing your DNA.
Yeah, you've abandoned your DNA.
You've abandoned
in every sense of the word.
And you have no reasonable expectation of privacy in any of the information contained within it.
Yeah, and that if you really there's people that would argue
you're violating his privacy. Yeah, it's he snuck into our house and no.
Yeah, I mean, if you break into somebody's house, you rape a woman and then you beat her to death and you've left your semen on her, I would say that you have absolutely zero privacy rights in that DNA.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, it's silly to think in any shape or form that you would have some type of privacy right in that. It's just that's an asinine thought.
That'd be asinine and mind-boggling. Yeah. I agree. 100%.
So the way genealogy works, take that DNA, upload it to this database, and get some relatives. And you have...
And now you have a lead. Now it's an investigative lead.
Now you can simply go out and track down the relatives, build a family tree, and you need to, the easiest way to explain it, and they're usually much more complicated than this, but the easiest one I can give you is a first cousin. Okay, so first cousins share grandparents. So all your first cousins, you share a grandparent, okay, on each side of your family. And so if you share, if you get a match, you upload bad guy's DNA and it's a first cousin, you're like, awesome. That's like gold in genetic genealogy because all you have to do is figure out who that match is. Okay, it's Heather Brown. And all we need to do is find out who her grandparents are. Okay, we know who her mom is. We know who her dad is. We just need to find mom's parents and dad's parents. We got the two grandparents. And guess what? Our bad guy is going to be the descendant of one of those two pairs. So then you just go to your parents, right? And you'd find out all of their descendants on both sides of your family. And you probably most people have 5 to 8 first cousins. So it's pretty quickly you could identify all 5 to 8. Okay, we're looking for a man though. It was a rape. Okay, so we found 6 and 3 of them were women, so it's only 3 men. Okay, well, when the crime occurred, 2 of those people were under 10 years old. Okay, so it probably wasn't the 2 10-year-olds that were raping a 25-year-old woman, but one of the guys was 25 at the time. Probably. Oh, he lived in the same city. Oh, he lived 2 streets down. There's your guy. So that's an investigative lead. Now, you call up the detective at that point in time and say, look, our research indicates that it's this guy. who lives 2 streets down from the victim. He was 25 years at the time. Go collect his DNA. So the protocol is go out and collect abandoned DNA from this person. Because genealogy, like, I could be wrong. Like, there might have been a 7th cousin that we missed. Maybe somebody was adopted. Or I'm sorry, maybe somebody was given up for adoption. You just don't know.
Right.
Like, genealogy is not that accurate. It's the way I say it, like, when you're looking in a field of haystacks for the needle, genealogy will tell you what haystack to look into, but the CODIS STR is going to give you the needle in the haystack. So I just pointed out it's probably this guy 2 streets down. So they go collect that guy's trash, put it out on his curb. Trash comes, we grab it from the trash man.
No expectation of privacy in the trash.
Right, exactly.
I learned that in law school too.
Yeah, in California. Some states you need a search warrant to do that, like in Oregon. But you get abandoned DNA, legally obtained DNA, and you make sure it's from him. Like you came out of his house, you saw him throw the fork away or whatever it was, and then you send that to your crime lab, and they get a CODIS STR, and they match it against the crime scene profile, and hopefully you get like a 1 out of 47.5 septillion to 1 that it's him, and use that as your probable cause, along with any other circumstantial evidence. And that's what you use for your arrest warrant.
Wow.
So that's the way genealogy works. And
fascinating.
Yeah, it's a.
I love how you break it down for us dummies in the room. And I've had this explained to me, and I've presented DNA evidence, so I have had some training in it. But
it's hard. But
it's hard if you don't have that.
Genealogy is very, 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 very. I talk all the time with people and go to conferences on it, and even people in the industry mix terms up and mix up the way it works in the investigative procedure. And there's lots of protocols and things like that we did at the FBI that I think should be emulated. Like the FBI. So Steve Bush and I started the FBI team. Now I think there's over 200 FBI employees on the team nationwide.
So they've really taken run with this.
Yeah, the FBI. I love that. Yeah, the FBI has a great team on it. FBI. They're really good at it, and pretty much in every state, you can call an FBI office, and there's somebody there that'll handle the genetic genealogy, and they'll work with law enforcement. And that was actually, for me, probably one of the most rewarding aspects of law enforcement and genetic genealogy is working with all these different agencies. And I will tell you, like, you probably know this, like, the FBI doesn't always have the greatest reputation with other law enforcement necessarily, for whatever reason. Probably most of it is driven, either by just personalities or just, I think law enforcement in general, everyone's pretty competitive. But I will tell you, I've been at several conferences where detectives have gotten up and presented on cases that they solved, where I may have helped or somebody in the FBI team helped, because the FBI generally, we always tell detectives, like, look, we'll solve the case for you. I'll do it all for you. Or you want to do it all yourself, just call me if you have questions, whatever you want, or we'll work it together. And it just depends. Some agencies just give me the guy's name when you guys are done. Some agencies, we want to learn how to do this. We'll call you if we have questions, Steve. And sometimes we work them hand in hand. But I will say that I've had numerous detectives get up at conferences, and they will say, like, the best experience they've ever had working with the FBI has been working on genetic genealogy, because it's been an amazing experience working with the FBI and the FBI genealogy team, because it is like that. Like, we just want to help solve your case. And like, I'm really fortunate. The first case I did was the Golden State Killer case, right? Most people know that case. And and I've done lots of serial killer cases since then. I don't need I'm happy. I like solving cases, but I really like helping detectives solve their case. And we had a case, a great detective from Burbank PD. We worked with him on a serial killer case, no less. It ended up being the first genetic genealogy case prosecuted in Los Angeles County. And we got a conviction, a trial on that. But we worked that case with him, and he was like the young, new homicide detective, and they gave him this old case on it. And he called us, and we worked it together. He did a great job. He ultimately solved it. We helped him, but he did it, and he was a hero like of his department. Won like Office of the Year 2 years in a row.
I love that.
Did all this.
Okay, what's this guy's name so we can give him a shout out?
Oh, Aaron K.
Aaron K. from
Burbank PD.
Burbank PD. Yeah. Great job on that case. I love that you're solving crimes for victims.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah, great case. And but like Aaron was just an example. Like a lot of times that we've had, like where these guys go and they solve a case, and like honestly, like they're the hero of their department. I love that. Like, and I want to see more of them do that. And that's what I'm really trying to do is get out there and get law enforcement to learn how to use forensic genetic genealogy.
So what are you doing now? Now that you left the FBI to their own devices, now what are you doing?
Yeah,
Tell us about, let's pump up whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago in 2021, I retired from the FBI. My colleague Steve Bush and I both retired. And we started a company called Indago Solutions. And it's an AI software company where we're trying to automate this whole process. So to do genetic genealogy, like I just explained it to you, it's complicated. Even the first cousin one. Try doing a third cousin and a fourth cousin one. It can be really difficult, really tedious, really long. So we're employing AI to make this a much faster process. And so our software is we take the match list that you get from these companies, plug it into the software, it runs it against public records, and it automates all of that work. So it'll just give you a suspect list. It'll give you an automated family tree, and here's your 5 subjects.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And is your company, do you sell that to law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, we're in the process of right now. We're beta testing it
Patenting
right now.
It and all that. Wow.
Yeah. So we've had we also work for like the Innocence Project. We solved a case this summer with them, and it's been great. We have a few other cases we're working on right now to do that. It's but a lot of what we do is we just go out and go to conferences, go to police stations, and train them on how this technique works. Because, like, obviously, police are incredibly overworked. Just not just 100%. With crimes, but admin, liability issues. It's a lot of work. Being a police officer, being an investigator, and trying to learn like some newfangled technique with DNA, and like I have to sit at my desk and I have to have a computer. Like it's a lot of work to do. And if we can make it simple and make it easy, like that's what they want. And that's what we're trying to do. Because like most cops, most detectives want to be able to like type it in, give me an answer. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
Nobody wants to go down to the library and like look up, genealogy records or something like that. So we're trying to make it a much more simple process and make it a regular SOP for law enforcement when they do cases. So when you have a sexual assault case or a murder case and there's DNA from the suspect there and it doesn't match in CODIS, well, like let's get the genealogy going right away. And so we'll do that. Like, the quadruple homicide a year and a half ago, I think it was, in Idaho, of those 4 college students.
Yes, at the University of Idaho.
Brian Koberger was arrested for that. That was done by the FBI genealogy team. Oh, wow. So here in Orange County. Yeah. So
shout out to you for that.
So the FBI team that, we trained and worked with, and they're phenomenal. They solved that case, I think it was in 43 days.
Wow.
Once they got the DNA. So
this is incredible. What great work you're doing.
So,
what's the name of your company? I want to pump it up again. What is it called?
Indago Solutions.
Indago?
Yeah, Indago. So
Indago Solutions.
Solutions.
And if there's any law enforcement listening to this true crime podcast and you want help solving your case, give Steve Kramer a call.
Yeah. Send us an email. Or
send him an email, Indago Solutions, and he'll help you with genetic genealogy, or at least teach you how to do it, and go to his conferences, right, and learn all about it.
Yeah.
So they can.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing technique. It's the a friend of mine, Tom Callahan, who's chief scientist at the FBI. He told Steve and I. He emailed us right before we retired. He goes, "This is probably the greatest innovation in law enforcement since the fingerprint, because it truly does have." I'm not overselling it either. It has the ability to identify anybody. If you leave your DNA there, we can identify you. Wow. Super powerful.
This is incredible.
Yeah,
I wasn't even aware of this.
Yeah.
I knew that you were doing good stuff. I didn't know it was this good.
Yeah, that's good. Our goal, our kind of informal motto is like, we want to take the cereal out of serial killer and cereal out of serial rapist.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, we want to eliminate this. Like, there's just no reason for that.
There isn't. We should catch them. Well, we should figure out a way to stop people from killing people to begin with. But
Yeah.
With that being said, in this broken world we live in, I don't know that that's going to happen in our lifetime, but definitely...
it's happening. Like we work, like the FBI team, right before we left, one of the last cases we worked on, it was in San Bernardino in 2021, in April, middle of the night in Rancho Cucamonga, a nice neighborhood. Somebody broke into a house, walked upstairs, walked into the master bedroom, and there a mother was sleeping and was getting stabbed to death by this individual. And then I think it was her 8-year-old daughter was sleeping next to her, stabbed the daughter as well. Killed both of them. Cut himself in the process. Left blood at the crime scene. They had no leads in that case. They didn't know who he was. We have his DNA. It didn't match in CODIS. The FBI team had just briefed San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. They called the FBI team, got the DNA. From the time of the crime to the arrest of the guy was 36 days.
Wow.
No other leads in that case. And it was a 19-year-old kid who wanted to do a thrill kill. So that was a serial killer in the making. 19 years old, just wanted to go out and try it. So imagine had he gotten away with it, I guarantee you there would have been more. And so I think that's a great example, like stopping a serial killer before he became one.
I love that. Well, gosh, thank you so much for what you're doing to help victims of crime, shining a light in the darkness, really, especially when, families just need closure from these types of crimes. Gosh, I appreciate you coming in here and teaching us all about this and everything that you had to share, all your stories, the Golden State Killers. This is fascinating. I'm fascinated. Would you come on again? Because I think
I'll
you
come
have
on anytime.
Okay, I think you have like 100 more stories.
Yeah, I got.
We're out of time right now for this episode, but I got to tell you, I know that you could sit here and tell me stories all day. I want to hear them, so I'm going to have you back.
Please. Yeah, I love talking about it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I love it. And I think people need to hear it. I think people need to know that this is available and out there and is a tool that law enforcement can use to stick it and stop these serial killers in their tracks. So God bless you for doing that. And thank you so much for coming on. And it was such a great pleasure. And we're out of time right now on the podcast. I know you guys wanted to hear more, so I'm going to have Steve back for sure. And you'll have to tune in next time to Defeating the Darkness, True Crime Stories with Downtown Heather Brown. You can follow us and like us on all the streaming platforms from iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, and I'm missing one of them. And YouTube. You can watch the video. Did I already say that? You can watch the video on YouTube. Anyway, find us, follow us, listen to the podcast, and we'll see you next time. And until we meet again, if you can't find the light, be the light.